Hi, I'm Scott Jones. I'm the editor of the 2016 Martian Migraine Press anthology, Cthulhusattva, Tales of the Black Gnosis. And I have with me on the phone tonight one of the authors who has a story in that anthology, Jamie Mason. His story is called Mr. Johnson and the Old Ones. When I first read it, it was immediately jumped out as something very unique, different from anything else in the book. Probably different from a lot of things you've read in a lot of Lovecraftian material you've read before. And I'm very happy to have Jamie here to answer a few questions and chat about the anthology and what it was like for him to put together Mr. Johnson and the Old Ones. Jamie, welcome.
Thank you, Scott.
So we have in your story, it's basically not to give anything away or to be all spoilery, but we have a certain famous blues man, which if you're at all interested, in the history of American music, you would definitely know. And basically a bit of a showdown at the crossroads down in Mississippi, where this blues man basically comes up against the machinations and what would you call it? He's definitely an ambitious fellow, the antagonist in this story. So what can you tell me about your inspiration for writing Mr. Johnson and the Old Ones, Jamie?
Well, I may be a little bit less discreet than you and mention a name or two.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
But I appreciate your discretion. I'm very new to the Lovecraftian genre. I've written science fiction for the last 7 years and published in pro and semi-pro markets there. But I decided that it was time for a change, and I felt moved to write something Lovecraftian because Lovecraft wasn't something I'd been into fairly recently, but as a teenager I'd absorbed him into my DNA, and he stayed. And also I myself am something of a blues man. I played in a blues rock band in the late 80s, early 90s, and actually supported myself, played semi-professionally.
Nice. Excellent. So you've definitely got the background then for that. So what drew you to Lovecraft at this time in your life? Was it just a fortuitous turn of events, or?
Well, that's actually a really good question. I'm not sure. I have some wonderful colleagues, fellow writers who kind of straddle the sci-fi weird fiction boundary, if you will. People like Silvia Moreno Garcia, who actually was just up for a Locus Award.
Yeah.
Guys like Nick Mamatas, and I would see them writing Lovecraftian stuff and think, well, isn't that great that old Howard's vision continues to live on. But I was also very inspired, really, by a lot of the modern Lovecraftian writers, and particularly the younger folks coming up. I was very impressed with what they were doing. I thought, well, maybe I'll try my hand at it. How badly can I fail?
Well, there's certainly various bars throughout the Lovecraftian genre. Some are low, some are high. I think I agree with you that Mamatas is, just one of those writers. I don't think anybody can write like him. Same goes for Laird Barron, Cody Goodfellow. We know a lot of the same folks, but yeah, it's definitely a genre that's kind of coming to its own, I think, in the second decade of this 21st century. Lovecraft just has this resonance. And I think as we get closer to his, to his correlating of the contents, as it were, as we continue to move forward into whatever we're becoming as a species, it might become more and more relevant. But that draws back to your story as well, Jamie, because of course, okay, I'll drop the discretion as well. Robert Johnson basically meets H.P. Lovecraft. It's kind of an alternate universe Lovecraft. I'll make no bones about it. You've basically taken some of Lovecraft's worst qualities
Yeah.
right? And made them very dominant. In that way, the story is it's almost a wonderful cartoonish, and I don't mean that in a bad way. But there's such broad strokes and real poetry in there as well. But the broad strokes with which Lovecraft is painted is I think very amusing. For one thing, it's one of the more darkly funny reads in the book. Did you feel any discomfort on your end? Basically, taking some of Lovecraft's worst qualities, his racism, xenophobia, and what have you, and just turning them all up to 11, getting very stroppy with it.
Yeah, did kind of a Nigel Tufnell thing with it, I never made it in a chapeau shop, so I decided to write Lovecraft. I have only recently learned about Lovecraft the man, mostly as a result of Sylvia's thesis, but and talking with her as well. But I find that there seems to be two schools of thought about Lovecraft's racism. They either soft pedal it, excuse it as part of the time, or a stage he was passing through. Oh, later in his life, he was far better about it.
That's right. He mellowed out, eh?
Well, he may well have been true.
Mm-hmm.
But the only thing that we have to make that conclusion is public utterances of one kind or another. Yeah. We don't really what he thought. And I think the other extreme is the extreme that says, no, he was damn racist through and through. And that was in fact the origin and the meaning of the entire mythos. And I have to be very, very careful here because I'm a newcomer to this whole field. Mm-hmm. And there are people with a lot of deep knowledge about this guy, and I respect that. But as a writer and as an artist, I feel very strongly that much of what Lovecraft did was extremely racist. And in fact, his art itself is a way, to a great extent, of taking his racism and his discomfort with the other and symbolizing it, symbologizing it, and giving it a field to play on.
Yeah, do you think he was attempting a sort of unconscious therapy there?
Maybe he could have been.
Yeah.
Certainly, this was a guy he wasn't comfortable with anybody who wasn't kind of, I don't know, white, upper middle class New England,
Yeah, that wasn't him or his ideas of what he was, whether or not that actually had any sort of basis in reality. Yeah, very interesting. It's yeah, he's a thorny fellow. But this is kind of what I was going for with this anthology, Cthulhusattva. Quite aside from the racism, one of the aspects that a lot of the dyed-in-the-wool Lovecraftian fans, and more power to them, God love them, is the this idea that, well, Lovecraft was an atheist, there's no spiritual themes in his book, and and if you've read my book, if you've read When the Stars Are Right, Towards an Authentic Related Spirituality, I can pull pretty profound stuff out from between the lines of Lovecraft's fiction, and that's kind of what I wanted to go with Cthulhusattva, which is why I like your story so much, because we have in the character of Robert Johnson, someone who knows about sacrifice, and he knows about what's needed to move in worlds that aren't his own, and he seems to be coming out of it the other end. He's a wise man, our blues man, and he knows what needs to be done at any given time, and he's presented with the other. They're both presented with the other. You've got Lovecraft being presented with Mr. Johnson, and Johnson with Lovecraft, and the conflict is a fascinating one. Thank you for writing it.
I'd like to just jump in and add something if I could.
Absolutely.
I think Lovecraft and his treatment, particularly of African Americans, was profoundly monstrous.
Mm.
And he himself, I think, viewed them for at least part of his life in monstrous terms. And it occurred to me that if I was to write a story with a protagonist like Robert Johnson, and I'd mentioned at this point that I'm taking this story and actually expanding it into a novel right now.
Oh, fantastic! I was not aware. Great.
Yeah, and it's been a fascinating process because it's caused me to reach out and connect with African American friends in the artistic community. Getting their feedback as they gave me feedback on the story. I reached out to my African American friends and asked them to read and comment, and they did. And those comments were interpolated into the finished story. But it occurred to me, this experience of trying to see through Robert Johnson's eyes gave me a sense of, if Lovecraft could take black people and turn them into monsters, then wouldn't a black man in a Lovecraftian world, wouldn't some of the monsters he has to deal with be white people?
Yeah, absolutely.
Make the white people the other.
I think you've done that very effectively. So kudos to you, sir.
I've tried to, but I mean, I'm also not unaware of some of the controversies that are going on in the literary world,
Yeah.
And I don't know. That did not factor into my decision to write the story, but as the story was being written, and as it was being presented to you, and it's funny, Scott, because I finished it, and like the next day, you open the submission portal. It just seemed perfect, Yeah. So I went for it, and I'm hoping that it can be a small paper boat cast out on the choppy oceans of racial discord, but set out gracefully.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I picked it, sir. It was an easy choice. We had over 400 submissions. That was one of the easier choices to make for sure. It just fits the theme quite nicely. Very glad to have you in the book. So that's exciting to hear that it's being turned into a novel. Do you have anybody looking at that?
I don't want to be too specific, but I have an agent who's expressed interest.
Fantastic. Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, you'll let us. You let me know. I'll let Martian Migraine Press readers know, and of course, once if when that gets rolling, we're definitely going to be interested in that because I want to hear more of this story. It's Mr. Johnson and the Old Ones is a bit of a, it's one of the shorter tales in the anthology, and if that's a teaser, sir. I'm in for the long haul. Once the full meal gets served. There I am mixing my metaphors all over the place. It's late.
Well, thank you.
Wonderful. And can you tell us, Jamie, if folks want to read more of your writing or contact you on the internet, where can they go to do that?
Well, I have a website. It's www.jamiescribbles.com.
Okay. Perfect.
And that has links. Jamie Scribbles, all one word. That has links to Facebook and email and Twitter and all that good stuff. Ideal.
Yeah, it's always good to have an author portal, that's for sure.
Yep.
Wonderful to talk to you, sir.
Yep.
And of course, you're aware of when the book officially drops, which is very soon. It's going to be Cthulhusattva, Tales of the Black Gnosis from Martian Migraine Press, dropping on Monday, May 23rd. It will be available in multiple formats, paperback, and of course all electronic formats from most of your fine retailers and independents. You can, if they don't have it, you can certainly order it up. So I hope lots of people get out and do that because they need to read your story and the other 14 stories in the collection.
I'm looking forward to reading it.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to getting you your copies. All right, sir. We'll talk to you later. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks so much, Scott.
No problem. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.